All right, next up, let's go ahead and implement the submission local service impl. Now this is pretty much going to follow the same ideas, same format as the assignment local service impl, maybe with a few twists here and there. So let's head over to our solutions. So heading down here to the solutions folder one more time, heading over to solutions, chapter 6, solution 6 gradebook, and we're down here in the snippets folder again. Here in the snippets folder, we're going to open up 02, create the service layer, and the next file we're going to copy over is our submission local service impl.txt. So go ahead and open up that file. And once the file is open, go ahead and copy all of the contents of the submission local service impl. So I'll go ahead and Control A, copy, and let's head over to the class itself, submission local service impl. So this is in the same section we were at before, right? And then submission local service impl. So if you need the directory, right, gradebook service, source main Java, and then the package that ends in service.impl, and it's there that we find the submission local service impl. So we'll go ahead and open it up. All right, we'll highlight everything here in the submission local service impl class. We'll remove it and then paste the snippet that we just had. All right, so scrolling back up to the top, first thing I'm going to do is save the file, and then I'm going to clean up a little bit. We'll go ahead and remove everything that's to the left. Again, trying to stay neat since we're going to be opening up a bunch of files. So let's go ahead and scroll down and follow the instructions here. All right, so the first one, let's take a look. So right now, right, we have to override this. We do have an error here, right? Just letting us know that we just have to implement the rest of our add submission since we tacked on this add override right here, right? We're basically telling Liferay that we want to use our add submission and not the default. Right, we might use some aspects from the base impl, but let's go ahead and push on. So first things first, we're going to get our assignment. Now there's two different ways you can get the assignment. You can either use the assignment persistence defined by, or you can use the assignment local service. I personally would rather use the API. Just in my mind, that just clicks a little bit better for me. So we're gonna call the assignment local service dot, and we're going to get assignment, and we're gonna get the assignment based off of the assignment ID since we have that as a parameter up there. So get assignment by the assignment ID. Again, use Control Spacebar to autocomplete. It's gonna make our lives a lot easier. Next thing we need to do is we need to get our user, right? We have the comment here saying even though we're not going to be using that user object, it does ensure that we're able to actually get it, or it's there. So first off, we're going to need the user ID. There's two different ways we can get the user ID. I like to use the service context object for this. The service context object allows us to grab Liferay specific parameters here in the service layer. So service context dot get, we want to get the user, right, and get the user's ID number. All right. Next up, right, we want the actual user himself. So we can make our service call to the user local service. So user local service, right, to get our user by the user ID we just retrieved. So let's see, there it is, user ID. All right, so we're going to grab the user. Next up, we're going to be getting the student user. Again, we're not using that student user just yet, but that's okay. So in order to do this, we have two different ways. We can use the user persistence or the user local service. Again, I like to use the user local service. I like to use the service more specifically, again, that's just my preference, right? So we're going to get user, so control spacebar there, get user using that student ID. Okay, let's go ahead. We can keep on going here. All right, we need to create or generate the submission ID. This is the foreign key, right? We have the hint telling us how to do this. So we're going to make our call to the counter local service, right? Dot, and we're using the increment method once again. So increment is going to use the string argument, and the hint tells us what to do here, right? Use counter local services class name tied signature. All right, so the class name here is going to be submission dot class, right? And then we want to get the name of our submission, so the one that we're going to be eventually creating. Next up, we're going to scroll down and we need to create the submission object itself. We have a gimme here, so that's pretty nice. So from here, we're going to use submission. So submission local service to create the submission object. And we're going to pass in that submission ID, right, to create the submission object. Right. And then down here, right, we're setting all of the various attributes of the submission. The submission ID, the assignment ID that's based off of. So again, the idea here is when we create an assignment, this is for students to be able to create their submissions for the assignment. So for each submission, we want it tied to a specific assignment. So we're going to have that assignment ID set as well. All right, so got that taken care of. Next thing we need to do is we're going to make our call to the add submission to add this submission to the database, or persist it to the database. All right, and then finally, last thing we need to do is we need to return the submission object itself. So here we go. Go ahead and save along the way. Next up, what we need to do is we need to get our submissions based off of the assignment. So get all of the submissions that are created for a specific assignment. And so we see here in our method signature that we have two parameters, the group ID and the assignment ID. So the idea here is we're going to, based off of a specific assignment at a specific site, get all of the submissions for that assignment. So in order to do this, we're going to be using that submission persistence API, right, to find by, and then we have G_A. So we're going to select this first one here for the list of submissions. Going to be passing the group ID and the assignment ID. With all of that, go ahead and save the file. It doesn't hurt to save along the way. Next up, right, we have the same idea going on, right, but we're going to have a start and an end. So same thing. So submission persistence dot find by, and then we're going to have the start and the end parameter in there as well. All right, so let me make sure I select the correct one, and this is going to return a list. So got that one good. And then we can go down the line. So group ID, assignment ID, start and end. All right, so very good. All right, so from here, right, same thing, get submissions count by assignment. So we're going to use the submission persistence API to count by, and this is going to be based off of the group ID and the assignment ID, right? So the number of submissions for a specific assignment at a specific site. So we can have these two parameters good to go, right? And then saving along the way. All right, next up, right, submission, grade and comment submission here. Next hint, get the submission. Just use this dot get submission. Okay, we'll get the gimmies here. It's not too bad, right? We do have the submission here. All right, and then we'll pass the submission ID to get it. All right, from there, we're going to set the grade, the comment, and the modified date. Last thing we need to do is we need to make our call to the original update submission. So update submission. Okay, passing the submission object here. All right, almost done, almost done. Right, next up, get the submission. So we're going to have this method grade submission here, right? And then we're going to be setting or updating the submission's grade. Okay, so first thing we need to get this submission. So get submission. Now let's try that again. I'll use Control Spacebar to get submission, and it'll be based off of the submission ID. So it's good there. Pass the submission ID. All right, update the following fields, right? So we need to update the grade modified, right? So use the submission setter. We can do that. So submission object dot, and then you can look through here. It's going to be something like set, and let's do the grade first. Set grade, and then pass the grade. We'll do the same thing for the modified date. Dot set modified, pass the modified date, and then one more time submission. Looks like we're good there. So since we don't have the modified date object here, we can just create the new date like so. All right, so taking care of that, and then last thing we need to do is return the updated submission. So we can do that. Gives us the hint there. Super update submission, passing the submission object, and then we'll save along the way. All right, last thing here is with our update submission, since we have the @override here, this is going to silence, quote unquote, the base implementation's update submission. So let's go ahead, we'll push on just a couple more things here. So first thing we need to do is get the submission. So we can use this, get submission, right, to get the submission based off of the submission ID. After that, what we're going to do next is, right, we're going to set all of the relevant fields that are going to be updated along the way. So submission dot, we'll do set submission text. So set submission text, passing the submission text object. We'll do the submission date. So set submit, there it is, submit date, passing the submit date. If we have it, it assumed that, so we can just have the new date. So new date, like so. All right, submission set modified date. Right, we don't have a modified date as well, so creating that new date. So far so good. And then last thing we need to do here is persist the entity. So we'll just call super update submission, and then pass in the submission object like so. And last thing we need to do is return that submission object itself, right? And then we're good. So you're going to see there's the exceptions here. Since we are suppressing it, it's just saying, hey, we must override it. So once we rebuild our services or rerun Service Builder, these things will be taken care of. So I'm not a big fan of having these errors stay here if we can do something about it. So let's go ahead and do something about it. So what we're going to do is let's go ahead and run Service Builder. So over here on the right hand side, let's double click Build Service. And then we're just going to wait for a few moments as Service Builder does its thing, right? And so what Service Builder is doing is taking a look at our service impl classes and then rewriting everything that needs to be updated. So if you look within the console, you'll see here that the APIs have been rewritten. Now, whenever we rerun Service Builder, we're always going to perform a Gradle refresh afterwards. So I'll go ahead and right click the training workspace, head down to Gradle, and then refresh Gradle project. So we'll go ahead and let the Gradle project refresh. Right, and just tracking its progress down at the bottom right. Right, and then after it's rebuilt, you'll see here, yeah, we're good to go. Right, we do have the warnings here letting us know that we are not using the user or student user, but we already knew that, and doing this more so as a check. So very good. Again, this is another good point or a good place for you to do a little review, take a look at the code, and just kind of make sure everything is fine and dandy. And then once you're ready to progress, feel free to do so when you are ready.